Good morning. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to begin in any minute now. We have a live stream that we want to begin, so let's not have our online participants wait for too long. Thank you very much.
Oh, welcome. That's better? Okay. Well, in a way, I can say we can, thanks to all of you.
Recording in progress.
Well, there you go. Thanks to all of you, we can declare success already. In one way, there is clearly significant interest in our topic, in Ukraine recovery and in the Ukraine Recovery Conference in June. If there is Ukraine fatigue, I'm not sure it even exists, it certainly is not here. So, or to put it another way, I apologize for cramming you into a nice room that is slightly too small for what we want to do, but we didn't foresee this level of interest. So thank you all for coming, even those from far away. I know it's quite a hassle to travel from Ukraine. Several of you did. We really deeply appreciate it for coming to this event. My name is Thomas Kleine-Brockhoff. I'm with the German Marshall Fund of the United States, which along with the Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development of Germany and its main development agency, GIZ, is your host today. Minister Schulze, I want to explicitly thank you and your team at the ministry as well as at the agency for this excellent cooperation. Some of you may know GMF has been extensively involved in ideas production and planning for reconstruction. We've done that under the headline of a Marshall Plan for Ukraine, not because we believe it's 1948 all over again, but because it's a similar level of ambition and a similar level of strategic determination that is necessary today. And I want to do my little propaganda moment. You can find some of our work down where you have a coffee later. And even for a foundation like GMF, such extended engagement would not be possible without partners to underwrite the effort. So I want to specifically acknowledge and mention our partners in this endeavor, the Open Society Foundation, the Foreign Ministry of Denmark, EY, and the Zeit Foundation in Hamburg. When it comes to the reconstruction of Ukraine, I would be remiss if I didn't mention Ambassador McCabe. Now, he, of course, is a real force in town. He's already all over the TV even this morning. And he, of course, that includes, of course, his work with civil society and, importantly, with the Ukrainian diaspora here in town. So welcome, Ambassador. So please allow me one remark about the goal of today's conference. We all know it'd be difficult for Ukraine to create the necessary catch-up growth if it doesn't have human capital in the required quality and size. Consequently, the Ukrainian and the German governments want to make this a specific focus of the upcoming Ukraine Recovery Conference in June. And therefore, the goal for us here today is to hear from as many as possible for you about this topic. Now, you might ask, why is that the goal, to hear from stakeholders assembled in this room? Well, it's because we want to understand at this stage the lay of the land, the policy landscape, understanding the policy landscape and the options. How do people think about the challenge at hand from different perspectives, from different organizational backgrounds, from different countries? Which new ideas might be out there that you bring to the table today? What alignments are possible on policy, and maybe also misalignments? So the bottom line is there's 6 weeks out for the governments to prepare this conference, and there is ample time to adjust. So therefore, your input can matter and your input can help. To ensure multi-perspective in the course of this day, this will be, let's say, a conference not of speeches, but of short interventions, of which there will be many. So more about that later when I'll return as your master of ceremonies, or better to say, as your traffic cop. So for now, I want to wish you a productive day, and I want to turn it over to Minister Schulze. The minister will be followed by the ambassador, and then we will have a video message from Yulia Sviridenko, the first Vice Prime Minister and Minister of Economics of Ukraine.
Dear Deputy Minister Chesnokov, Ambassador, it's a pleasure to have you here, partners and experts. I want to introduce to you Tatiana. When Tatiana fled her home in eastern Ukraine with her 3 children, she had nothing, no home, no money, and no vocational skills. And at the time, her husband was fighting at the front, and Tatiana had to fend for her family all by herself. And when Tatiana arrived in Vinnytsia, she joined the EU for Skills program, and she took courses in accounting and IT at the vocational college, which is supported by German funding. She graduated with flying colors and quickly found an accounting job at a small supermarket. Her eldest son also started training courses at the same college, and now Tatiana can support her own family and start thinking about their future after the war. Ladies and gentlemen, people like Tatiana, who had to leave everything behind, need opportunities like these. They need the chance to make a fresh start. They need it as individuals to make a living, but they also need it as members of Ukrainian society so they can rebuild their war-torn country. As a result of the Russian war of aggression, Ukraine is facing a major demographic challenge. Over 10 million people are either fighting on the front line, have sought refuge abroad, or have been internally displaced. This has caused a dramatic shortage of skilled workers. The Ukrainian Ministry of Economy estimates that 2023, an additional 4.5 million skilled workers will be needed, especially in key sectors that are crucial for the recovery and reconstruction process, such as IT, agriculture, construction, and healthcare. The people who are currently able to work in Ukraine are also facing special challenges. Violence, displacement, and trauma are causing great mental distress to large parts of the population. And many people have had to interrupt their education or training. This may have lifelong consequences for a whole generation. Young people in particular are facing uncertainties about the future as a result of the war. And there are more female-headed householders than ever before, with mothers having to juggle work and childcare at the same time. While this is tragic, women also bring with them a great potential for change and rebuilding. It reminds me of the Trümmerfrauen, the rubble women who rebuilt Germany after the Second World War. Without them, we would not be a prosperous country as we are today. So focusing on women and empowering them for leadership roles is not only fair, it is common sense. My ministry has been supporting vocational training and upskilling of Ukrainians for many years, and we have increased this support since Russia's war of aggression began. But there are huge needs in this area, so that neither the support from Germany nor from many other donors working in these areas will be sufficient. We need more international partners, donors, and the business community to come together to invest and create the conditions for Ukrainians to rebuild their country. In order to ensure that they are qualified and trained for reconstruction, I want to form a skills alliance together with other international stakeholders. Alliance members will provide training and qualification programs for Ukrainians inside and outside the country, including host countries such as Germany, Poland, and the Czech Republic. In doing so, Ukrainians are appropriately equipped with the skills to rebuild their country upon their return. International and Ukrainian businesses will be essential partners in this initiative, and they employ the workforce that will drive Ukrainians' economic recovery. But it is not just about any kind of work or training. It is important to me that Ukrainians have access to decent jobs with fair pay that meet international labor standards and promote gender equality. Because only long-term employment of women will give Ukraine sufficient skilled staff so it can become an economic powerhouse in Europe. Trade unions have a particular role to play there. They campaign for effective labor rights, which are required for good work and decent jobs. And they are key agents of socio-economic transformation by ensuring that employees, and women in particular, are included. Trade unions must be involved in social dialogue and the recovery of Ukraine. However, a skilled workforce is only one part of the equation when striving for economic success. Structural support for small and medium-sized businesses is needed so that they have the capacities and resources to employ skilled workers. My ministry is cooperating closely with other German ministries, Ukraine, and international partners to improve and to increase the Business Development Fund. Together, we created the fund 25 years ago to provide direct financing for small businesses. And in the current situation, the fund has become even more important because it is keeping companies alive in times of war. And in the last 2 years, around 40,000 small businesses have managed to keep going, secure jobs, and adapt to the new conditions during the war. For example, with the support of the fund, 5 million hectares of farmland could be cultivated in March and April last year, and that is 16% of Ukraine's total agricultural surface. Together with our Ukrainian partners, I would like to develop the fund into a national promotional institute for economic reconstruction in Ukraine, similar to Germany's KfW. This is one of the initiatives that the German government decided on 2 weeks ago. We will support companies and private actors in the reconstruction of Ukraine with 15 measures. And these measures are aimed, for example, at creating investment and export guarantees for international companies or that wanted to do business with Ukraine, and they will prepare Ukraine economically for EU integration. But the bottom line is that more money needs to be invested by international partners. Mobilizing this kind of international support is crucial, which is why my ministry, together with the Ukrainian government and the German Marshall Fund, is holding this conference today. Its purpose is to prepare the Ukraine Recovery Conference, which Germany will be hosting in June. And together with all of you, I want to find solutions that address these demographic challenges in Ukraine and open up new opportunities for its people. Because opportunities give hope, and hope gives Ukrainians the strength to endure hardship and keep on fighting for their goals. Together we can support Ukraine in investing in its workforce and increasing its earning power to rebuild back better. And together we can support people like Tatiana and her family in increasing their resilience. Together we can build a free European Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear Minister, dear Svenja, dear Thomas, Andriy, colleagues coming from Germany and Ukraine to Berlin. It might be a bit misleading, Ukraine Recovery Conference 11th, 12th June, but it is something which will be happening not in future. This is what is happening right now. And it is our daily business now, recovery and rebuilding. Russia hits our cities, and I still remember the day of 10th of October 2022 when Russian missile hit in the center of Kiev at the crossroads near the Shevchenko University. In a week time, there were no trace of damage at this spot. We have rebuilt it. Russian terrorists destroy our energy infrastructure, continuously destroy our energy infrastructure. Ukraine's emergency services and Ukrainians who work in the energy sector repair it in the night. So in the next morning, Ukrainians can get their electricity and it warms. And this has been happening with huge support from our Western partners and from Germany. So from this point of view, the reconstruction is our psychological warfare. Russia can destroy our power stations, but not our power. They can cut us off from light, but in the end, the light will overcome this darkness. It is very important that Germany is not just giving us tools to repair the infrastructure, be it generators or temporary shelters. Germany is also teaching us Ukrainians how to make these things ourselves. Metaphorically speaking, Germany is giving us both building blocks and building skills. In this respect, I welcome very much, Svenja, your initiative of the Skill Alliance for Ukraine. Well, this is the way we will make things happening in Ukraine by ourselves. We will rebuild and give Ukrainian people jobs. This reminds me a lot of the best practices we know from German military. Germany not only gives us weapons, tanks, air defense systems, artillery, and other things. It is the Bundeswehr that teaches our boys and girls how to use them. And over 10,000 Ukrainian soldiers have went through training here in Germany. So we suffer from brain drain from Ukraine. Those who found shelter here in Germany will be needed back in Ukraine. And I often say this as ambassador, it is my goal to motivate people to come back. The better motivation for that would be, of course, security and safety. And this is why it goes hand in hand. The better our cities are protected from Russian rockets, the better we can sleep at night to work, not just 35 hours a week, but rather 25 hours a day. The better the sooner we will make it happen that Ukraine will be rebuilt. Like any other capital, human capital cannot and must not be reserved for better times. And that's why I welcome that Germans will invest into training not only Ukrainians in Ukraine, but also Ukrainians here in Germany. And this is why we are in close touch with the Minister for Workforce, Hubertus Heil, to make sure that Ukrainians get better tailored jobs proposals from German companies. And once again, my call to all the big German companies who will be investing. We know that sound. This is air raid siren somewhere in Ukraine. So that's what we experience every time. To make sure that Ukrainians get better proposals, I call on the German businesses who will be investing in Ukraine and participate in the recovery. Make sure that your jobs are suggested to those Ukrainians which have found shelter here. Over 51% of Ukrainians have university grade. And they're very skilled. So whenever you want to invest in Ukraine, please talk to the German government, talk to the local and regional governments. Make sure that you suggest the jobs and get these people and make sure they can work for you, because that would be a great investment also for them to come back to Ukraine and to be among pioneers who would work for your companies when they're back. So this is the way how we can make sure that Ukraine will be rebuilt and that in times of peace, after we liberate our territory, we got a lot to do in Ukraine. With your support, with European support, I'm sure that's a project which is doomed for success.
Esteemed ministers, ambassadors, colleagues, I'm grateful for your focus on rebuilding Ukraine's human capital. I regret not being able to address you physically, but I'm delighted to do it online. Full-scale war devastates not only our country's physical infrastructure, but also impacting millions of Ukrainian lives. Recent data from the IOM indicates that over the past 2 years, more than 14 million Ukrainians, almost a third of the country's population, have been forced to leave their homes, with over 6.5 million of them currently living outside Ukraine. This is a major mental trauma, both for those who have fled their homes and those who are waiting for them back home. Simultaneously, it's a significant blow to our economy because the migration crisis directly impacts the crisis of human capital. Currently, we are witnessing structural unemployment in Ukraine's labor market. We must join our efforts to address this issue, primarily by creating conditions for Ukrainians to return home. Most are willing to return even before the war ends, but only if they are certain that their lives and the lives of their children will not be at risk. This primarily depends on the deoccupation and demining. Of course, the armed forces plays a key role in liberating our territories. For our part, we are actively involved in humanitarian demining of our lands. In that sense, we feel the need for support in terms of knowledge and equipment. Regarding the restoration of destroyed housing, the government is working on several projects. We provide compensation for partially damaged housing under the Yevidnovlenia. We also have a program of affordable loans for housing Yeosela. The program also has prospects for expansion through involvement of both expertise and funding from partners. As for employment and business creation opportunities, there are a granting program. We provide financial support for Ukrainians. What can we do right now? First, we need more air missile system to protect our cities. On the humanitarian side, we can scale up retraining programs, especially for women, as they constitute the majority of our displaced people. We can jointly develop new training programs that align with the trend of the modern labor market. We can attract donor funding to our granting programs for starting businesses. I believe that together we can achieve this goal.
So, and with that, we can start our first session. You will see a couple of slides and a presentation about the demographic challenge in a little more detail that Ukraine faces. For that, I would like to invite our two panelists to what we want to call the stage here. Our moderator is Markus Ziener, visiting fellow with GMF and a professor at the University of Applied Sciences here in Berlin. He'll introduce our speaker. The one thing I will need to tell you is that you want to put those microphones right in front of you, even if you believe everybody can hear you. There's a live stream going on, and so that people in the live stream can also hear. So keep it close to your mouth, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Thomas, and a warm welcome to our guest who traveled here from Italy, actually, Daria Michailishina. She's a senior economist with the Center for Economic Strategy in Kiev, and at the center she concentrates on labor economics and migration. Daria holds a master's degree in economic policy from University College London, and degrees in philosophy, politics and economics from the University of Warwick. And Daria, you're also a PhD student in economics at the University of Bologna. That's where you come from, yes. Italy, focusing on applied microeconomics and empirical political economy. Daria is also organizing workshops in support of Ukraine, and last year I had the pleasure actually to watch one of your presentations, which was very impressive. So it was very insightful. So we are very much looking forward to your presentation today here on Ukraine's demographic challenge.
Thank you very much. Let me go. Okay. First of all, thank you a lot for having me. It's a pleasure to present today in front of you. So for my presentation, I will mainly focus on refugees. And by refugees here, I mean more broadly all people who left the Ukraine after the full-scale invasion, not just those who have refugee status, but just to make sure we are on board with definitions, because in different countries, people who left Ukraine have different statuses. But yeah, I will talk about all of them. So first question is, how many Ukrainians are there abroad? And there are a lot of different estimates based on different sources. And based on our estimates, our best guess is that there are 4.9 million Ukrainians abroad right now. Out of them, 1.3 million are in Russia, many of whom were forcibly deported there. In other countries, Germany is actually right now #1 by the number of Ukrainians who stay there, with 1.3 million. And then Poland with around 1 million, and then Czechia, USA, UK, and Canada. And you can also see that the majority of Ukrainians who left did so at the beginning of the full-scale invasion, unfortunately, when the danger was the most acute. And since then, we see that around the same number of people come back and leave every month. In some months, as more people leave, in some months, as more people return, but the trend is more or less stable. Another important question is, who are those people? So based on our research, we have conducted 3 waves of surveys in November 2022, in April 2023, and in January 2024. And based on that, we can give general picture on demographic characteristics of Ukrainian refugees. So we see that 65% of refugees are female. These are including children. If you exclude children, even much higher percentage of refugees will be female. And speaking of children, as of our last wave, 38% are children, which is also quite high percent. And 70% of them have higher education, which is higher both compared to the average number of Ukrainians who have higher education, which symbolizes that this may result in some brain drain issues with Ukraine because people who are most educated unfortunately left. But it is also much higher than the previous waves of refugees that Europe has encountered, for example, refugees from Afghanistan and refugees from Syria, which means that the integration challenges would be different and it is maybe easier for Ukrainians to find jobs than for those previous waves of refugees. In addition, we can also see that Ukrainians who left were wealthier than the average Ukrainian before the war. And however, at the beginning of the war, they lost a very large portion of their incomes, as you can see on the plot to the right side of the presentation. But since then, many of them have regained their income, and many have started to work. For example, if we are talking about all countries, 45% of refugees worked as of January 2024, compared to 39% in May 2023. And of those who work, 60% already have higher incomes than they had before the war. So the most important question is, do Ukrainians who are currently abroad plan to return? The answer to that is that majority still do, but unfortunately the percentage of people who want to return decreases from wave to wave. Now this could be due to the fact that people who could have wanted to return have already returned, some of them, and but also due to the change in intentions for many reasons, maybe integration in the labor market, maybe because their expectations about the duration of the war were not met, and so on. And as I also want to reiterate, as previous speaker said, that the most important factors for return are security, either end of the war or at least end of the airstrikes and or war action in their native region. So air defense and other weapons are extremely important also for the return of refugees, because people do say that the security is very, very important factor, for the most important by far factor for them on whether to return. Also, other things is that only 16% are ready to return to their non-native region. So it means that also reconstruction and focusing on the rebuilding of all Ukraine is important, so that people can return to their home region. And we also looked at the intentions of children. So children are approximately the same intentions as their parents, but also children who are most connected to Ukraine, who still study remotely in Ukrainian school, are most willing to return. So it's also very important to keep that connection. And we also try to estimate how many Ukrainians may return and may stay abroad after the end of the war, and how it can impact Ukrainian economy. So in our estimates, depending on scenario, between pessimistic, optimistic, and other scenarios, between 1.4 and 2.3 million of Ukrainians may remain abroad after the war. And because of that, Ukrainian economy may lose between 3.9 and 6.3% of its pre-war GDP annually, which is a very significant proportion of GDP. So helping these people return and incentivizing them to return can also be viewed as a way to help Ukraine in its post-war reconstruction, so that Ukraine doesn't have to lose this much of GDP. And we also calculated how many people may move abroad after the war. This is only based on the relatives, specifically spouses of people who already moved abroad. So, for example, if a wife is abroad and a husband is in Ukraine, based on that, we see that up to 150,000 people may move abroad. And also, what is very important is that this refugee crisis, poses a very important demographic challenge to Ukraine. On the right, you can see Ukrainian demographic pyramid. In the dotted lines, you can see how many people in each age category were moved abroad and are now abroad. And we see that even before the war, Ukrainian demographic pyramid wasn't proportional, so it was skewed towards older ages, and there were not that many children. But now we see that the number of children has disproportionately decreased, and around 15% from 14 to 18% of children in different ages groups are currently abroad, which is a large proportion. And if they do not return, this will be a very huge challenge to the Ukrainian economy and to Ukrainian demography as well. So just to leave you on this slide, so these are our recommendations on what we think should be done to encourage Ukrainian refugees to return to Ukraine. So first of all, we need to cooperate with EU countries. This can be both in creating conditions to return. First of all, as I said previously, security is very important, so EU support and other countries' support in establishing security is number one issue, but also in other things like creating training courses in safer regions, for example, so that people can find a job that suits Ukrainian labor market. So this is very important. Also in reconstruction, which is also important so that people can return to their home regions. And then there are also things based on the Ukrainian side, for example, communicating with Ukrainians abroad through diplomatic missions, and then also reintegrating Ukrainians to Ukrainian schools when they return, so that such reintegration is as simple as possible, and to help people find, for example, housing and in the safer regions if they cannot return to their native region. This could be done, for example, through the mechanism of public-private partnership, where government funds the housing and the company creates jobs. And finally, our final recommendation is providing Ukrainians, not just refugees, but Ukrainians with freedom of movement, which is part of the Ukrainian entry to the EU, which is going to be also done earlier, because we now see that many Ukrainians are also afraid to go back to Ukraine, because they are afraid that they will not be paid benefits if they stay in Ukraine, if they go to Ukraine and then return back to Europe, or they will not be able to come back to Europe. But this freedom of movement allows people to both move back to Ukraine, and then if they don't like it, they will still have a chance to come back. So thank you very much for this opportunity, and yeah, I will end here. Thank you.
Yeah, Daria, thank you very much for this presentation. I think it's safe to say that the longer the war goes on and the longer refugees are here, actually the more difficult it is actually for them to think about going back. Is that one takeaway? It's probably not that surprising, but maybe you can give us a little more insight. To what extent are people, Ukrainians living here, coming here when the war started, to what extent are they integrated here in society?
Thank you for this question. So for the first part of the question, for sure, I think people had more optimistic expectations at the beginning of the war. Unfortunately, We see that the war is longer than many people expected. As for integration, I think it depends a lot on a country, because different European countries, if we're only talking about Europe, have adopted different strategies to Ukrainian refugees. For example, in Poland, many people work, majority of people already found jobs and work, while, for example, in Germany, most people attend some kind of language courses or integration courses, because Germany has integration strategy focusing on training Ukrainians first and paying them actually while they are attending these courses, and only finding jobs later. So, but in all countries, including Germany, the percentage of people with jobs is steadily increasing with time.
So money plays quite a role, actually, when it comes to thinking about going back or not. I mean, you said that 60% of those who work are better off than they used to be. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So it means in reverse that the ones who don't work probably are not better off.
I would say it depends, because many of those who do not work still have benefits, and depending on which country they are and which work they did in Ukraine, their benefits could be higher than their salary in Ukraine, but I don't have statistics on that.
Okay, you gave us a number of recommendations what to do. So if you would name the first three that are on top of your priority list, I guess it's safety, housing, and jobs. But is there anything else that probably is here that makes the top of the list?
Yeah, so for sure, number one by far is safety. Jobs, I would say, is number two. And maybe, housing is also important. Also, maybe general economic situation in Ukraine, quality of living, and so general quality of living, I would say.
We talk a lot about Ukrainians living in Poland, in Germany, and other countries. What about the Ukrainians who are still in Ukraine and who are pondering also leaving the country? Do you have any estimates what we're looking at here?
So as I said, we calculated the number of Ukrainians who may leave the war, the Ukraine after the war, to reconnect with their families abroad. But this is only those who already have spouses, for example, abroad. And those people, we calculate there are approximately 150,000, which is not that many considering the number of refugees and number of Ukrainians in general, but also many people may leave, or maybe not many, I don't know, who do not have anyone abroad, but just live with the whole family. But for those, we do not have any estimates. We haven't calculated it yet.
When traveling to Ukraine, you see a lot of commuting going on, Ukrainians coming from Poland, from other countries, and traveling to their home country, going back and forth. Is there any way actually of taking advantage of those commuters for the Ukrainian labor market?
Yeah, for sure. I think also what is important is that many Ukrainians who are currently abroad, they are also working remotely for a Ukrainian company. I think around 10% in our latest wave of survey. And it also benefits because many of those people pay taxes in Ukraine and they remain connected to Ukraine, so it will be more easier for them to transfer back to working for the same company in presence after they decide to return. But for those who commute, I think it's also important for them to keep in touch with Ukraine and to keep in touch with their families. Maybe they do not return. Majority of those who come back for a very short period of time, they don't do so for labor reasons, but it's still important that they are in touch with Ukraine.
I mean, since this is all about the future of Ukraine, the youth, the young generation plays an important role. Can you say something about their feelings towards Ukraine at this point?
Yeah, so we see that a lot of Ukrainians also who went abroad are currently, for example, students in the foreign universities, and it's also important to make sure that they are encouraged to come back because they develop very crucial human skills, human capital skills, and education. They get education and so on. And unfortunately, for now, we see that younger people are less likely to be willing to return than older people. which is an issue because, again, they are developing this labor market skills and they have more opportunity to work in the future. So I think it is important to also focus on encouraging these people to come back.
Okay, before we open up the floor to your questions to Daria, just one final question. Incentives play a big role. We talked about that. So if you have a list actually of what the Western countries, who are on the receiving end when it comes to Ukrainians coming here, what can they do actually to facilitate the return of refugees? Is there anything that you would say, well, that's a main point to look at?
Yeah, for the Western countries, I would say that, first of all, as I said, training, for example, establishing training programs in Ukraine rather than, or in addition to in their own countries, because as we said, jobs is very important. As for, we also see that some countries have adopted policies of compensating Ukrainians who come back home, but it's too early to say how effective they are because they just started to work. And some countries also start to kind of tighten the criteria for coming to them, or start to tighten the social benefits and reducing them to prevent more people to come in to them. So whether it will be effective, it's also too early to say. But yeah, we will for sure look into it.
Just one follow-up. Compensating for going back, can you elaborate a little on this?
Yeah, so I think some countries like Switzerland, I believe also some other countries, Norway, I think maybe, they compensate Ukrainians who return and stay back in Ukraine. There's like one-time payment, depending on country, it's a different amount to help them settle in and to stay in Ukraine.
It's probably too early to have already results here.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Daria. And yeah, please raise your hand if you have a question, and please introduce yourself briefly. If you, maybe the lady over there.
Hello, thank you very much. My name is Natalia Prigornitska. I'm from Alliance of Ukrainian Organizations and Open Platform. And thank you very much for organizing this conference and discussing about human potential for the recovery and rebuilding of Ukraine. It's a crucial topic. And when we are thinking about people who is living now in abroad, and when we are speaking about diaspora, for example, but also people that came now, and we are speaking about global Ukrainian community, my question is, how can the global Ukrainian community be involved in the recovery of Ukraine? What is your opinion? Thank you.
Thanks a lot. I think it's also a very important question. For example, I think it depends on specific individuals in the global Ukrainian community. So people who are working in business, they can cooperate with the Ukrainian businesses. People who are working, for example, in science, they can cooperate with Ukrainian scientists, and so on. So global Ukrainians can find the partnerships in their area of expertise and develop partnership on an individual basis. Also, obviously, they can contribute with, for example, funding or contributing monetarily to some important initiatives for either for rebuilding of Ukraine or for other important directions. And raising awareness with the local governments in the countries they live in to keep the Ukraine on the agenda.
Thank you. I think we had a question on the right.
Sorry, no, thank you. My name's Alex Munt. I'm from UNHCR in Ukraine. And just to pick up on a couple points. First, your survey findings very much mirror our intention surveys. I think in the past 2 years, we've seen roughly a 20% drop in intentions to return, from 84% in the summer of 22 to about 62% in January. I wanted to pick up on a couple of points. One is this sort of compensating people to return, and this is an area I think we should be very careful about, particularly at this point while the war is continuing. And I say this in part because those most likely to return, according to our intention surveys, are the most vulnerable, the least well integrated, and those who are sort of being squeezed out of social safety nets and are having trouble making a living and faced with the choice of going back to a country still at war. Our advice to all European states is not to incentivize return of the most vulnerable when they may not be safe and they may not be able to make a well-informed decision regarding their safety. The second part of this, and I think this is crucial, is really that we're starting to see emerging social tensions among different groups of people and the entitlements. So if states start paying refugees fairly significant repatriation packages to encourage them to return, while the assistance available to internally displaced people and war-affected people along the front lines is going to be a source of community tensions. We're already seeing some evidence of that. The final point I would make, just on sort of the aggregate numbers of who is likely to return, our findings, and I think this is an important policy dimension, is it's not the least likely to return are increasingly single people, the young, people enrolled in training programs, people employed in pretty good jobs. The most likely are people with elderly people in the household, people dependent on social safety nets, or people really struggling to find employment that are going to come back. And I think from a policy standpoint, we also need to consider how we're going to help people integrate into the economy once they get back, because it's not necessarily going to be the people most able to integrate back into the rebuilding of Ukraine. It will be people who will need support to upskill, childcare, and different forms of assistance to be able to contribute to the economic recovery. Thanks.
Thank you. Well, that was a whole package, actually, of questions and statements. Thank you very much. What's the one you want to?
Thanks a lot for this comment. In a lot of what you said, our survey results are also similar. What I would add is that out of those who want to return more, we also have a group of people who are well off, but very patriotic and very wanting to return. But on the other scale, we also have people who are young and who do not want to return. So on average, I would say the younger people are less willing to return, but there are many of them who still want to return. So it's important to not forget that. I agree that it's important to make sure that people who are vulnerable, and if they choose to return, there is a safe place for them to do so. So it's important, as I said, to invest in reconstruction and in creating jobs so that they have a place to stay. From what I saw from our survey, also people from, for example, Eastern Ukraine, they are not really willing to return right now. So for that, again, because unfortunately it's difficult for them to return to their home region. So based on that, I think it's mainly people from the regions which are unoccupied right now. And for them, I think it's possible to work on creating conditions to live, but also, again, it requires safety, and safety requires air defense and so on. So it's very important.
I think we have time for one more question before we come to a close. Maybe the lady in the front row.
My name is Ala Belikova-Scheuchit. I'm representing Landesbeirat für Partizipation. I don't know how to translate it. Berlin Landesbeirat für Partizipation. I'm a practitioner, and I'm also responsible for bringing people to the labor market. And, Ukrainians who are living in Berlin, they have received last week a letter from Daniel Terzenbach, who is Bundesbeauftragter, Sonderbeauftragter der Bundesregierung für Arbeitsintegration. It was a call to go to the labor market and to start working. And I'm the practitioner. I'm also helping people to start working. Ambassador Makeyev called German business to qualify people for Ukraine recovery. So who should compensate businesses? Because I think this is a job, or this is a task of business and not of politics. People who are on the labor market, they are employed by German businesses, and it is in the interest of German business to keep these people and not to lose them. And they are happy in their jobs. There are a lot of German companies who are giving housing for employees, who are giving even Betriebskita, kindergartens for their employers. They are giving everything to keep these people. How do you think should be the strategy of returning, or maybe you have also examples from other countries after the war? Because I think that because I see these people every day and I bring them to these jobs, and they are happy. Kids are happy at school. The longer they stay here, the more established, the more integrated they are here. So how do you see practical returnings?
Yeah, thanks a lot for this question. I think it's difficult to answer. I would say that, yeah, we see that, again, that many people have integrated, that many people found job and work, and it will be hard to compensate them in the same way in Ukraine, because salaries are obviously much higher in Germany than in Ukraine, especially if they're working in their area of expertise, so they're working in a qualified position. What I would say that I think, unfortunately, some of these people will not return, but I think for many, just the